Before we begin, if you're finding these stories compelling, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. It helps more people discover these accounts. And I'm genuinely curious, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. Now, let's talk about my first week as a Navajo Tribal Police officer and the rules they don't teach you at the academy. My name is Daniel Sosi, and a critical mistake I made caused me to forget and lose everything I thought I knew about the world. But I've gone too far afield. If I start from the beginning, it was August of the year 2003. I was 24 years old, and I was foolish enough to think that just a gun and a badge would be enough to keep people safe. I grew up in the Navajo Nation, in a small community near Kayenta, Arizona. My grandfather was a healer, but we didn't call him that. He was a Hatawi, a singer, someone who knew the ceremonies and prayers. My father left when I was little to look for work in Phoenix and never came back. My mother raised me and my sister alone, working in the Monument Valley Dissection Building when tourism was good, cleaning hotel rooms. I was the first person in my family to finish college. Got a degree in criminal justice from Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, then went straight to the police academy. I wanted to come back and help my people, wanted to make a difference. The reservation had problems. Everyone knew that. Poverty, substance abuse, domestic violence, the usual struggles of communities that had been systematically destroyed and told to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I thought modern law enforcement, proper training, professional procedures could help fix things. My grandfather warned me the night before I left for the academy. We were sitting outside his hogan watching the stars emerge over the mesas, and he said something I didn't understand at the time. There are two kinds of knowing, Shiyazi. There's the knowing they'll teach you in the Bilagana schools, the white man's way of understanding the world. And there's the knowing that comes from the land, from our people, from the stories we've kept alive for longer than anyone can remember. You'll need both to survive what's coming. I nodded respectfully, but inside I was already dismissing it as superstition. I loved my grandfather, but I was young and educated and believed in evidence and procedure. I believed the world could be understood, categorized, controlled. I was wrong. I reported for duty at the Kayenta District Police Department on August 18, 2003. The station was a low concrete building that looked like every other government structure on the reservation, functional and forgettable. My field training officer was Tommy Benally, a guy in his late 30s with permanent sunglasses, a tactical vest that had seen better days, and a calm demeanor that made you feel like nothing could surprise him. "Zosi," he said when we met, shaking my hand with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. "Heard you went to college. NAU, right?" "Yes, sir. Criminal justice degree, then the academy." "Don't call me sir. We're not military. Tommy's fine." He studied me for a moment. "Your grandfather is Ben Sosi, the singer up near Black Mesa?" "Yes, that's him." Something shifted in Tommy's expression, a slight relaxation I didn't understand. "Good." "That's good. Come on. Let me show you around." The station was small. A front desk where a civilian receptionist handled walk-ins, a bullpen with 6 desks, a holding cell that was usually empty, a break room with a coffee maker that looked older than me, and a gun locker. There were 8 officers total covering a district that was roughly the size of Connecticut. Response times could be an hour or more depending on where you were and what else was happening. "We do a little of everything here," Tommy explained as we walked through. Domestic calls, DUIS, welfare checks, livestock issues, traffic accidents, search and rescue when tourists get lost in the backcountry. Sometimes we assist the FBI with major crimes, but mostly we handle community policing. People know us, we know them. It's different than working in a city. I understand. I grew up here. You grew up here, but you've been gone 4 years. Things change. He grabbed 2 cups of coffee and handed me one. Let's take a ride. I'll show you the district. We headed out in Tommy's unit, a white Ford Explorer with Navajo Nation police markings. The radio chatter was sparse, mostly just routine check-ins. We drove north on Highway 163, that incredible stretch of road that cuts through Monument Valley, where the massive sandstone buttes rise from the desert floor like ancient cathedrals. Most beautiful commute in America, Tommy said, gesturing at the landscape. Never gets old. We drove in silence for a while, and I watched the familiar landscape roll past. The Mittens, those iconic formations that had been photographed a million times. Merrick Butte standing alone against the sky. The vast emptiness between settlements, miles and miles of sagebrush and red earth. So, Tommy said eventually, they teach you about cultural sensitivity at the academy? How to work with Native communities. We had some training, sovereignty issues, jurisdiction boundaries, that kind of thing. But not the important stuff. What important stuff? Tommy pulled off at a scenic overlook and turned off the engine. We were alone, nothing around us but rock and sky and silence. The stuff that keeps you alive, he said. The academy teaches you how to do traffic stops, how to clear a building, how to fill out reports. All useful, but out here, there are other rules. Unofficial ones. We call them protocols. What kind of protocols? The kind we don't write down, the kind we don't put in reports, the kind that get passed from officer to officer, usually after something bad happens. He pulled out a small notebook and a pen. I'm going to tell you 7 protocols. I want you to write them down, memorize them, and follow them without question. Can you do that? I must have looked skeptical because Tommy's expression hardened. I know what you're thinking. You went to college, you learned proper procedure, you think this sounds like superstition. Maybe it is. But these protocols were developed over 40 years of policing this land, and every single one of them was written in someone's blood. So you can believe they're just traditions, or folklore, or whatever helps you sleep at night. But you will follow them. Understood? Understood. Good. Write this down. I pulled out my own notebook, the one I'd bought specifically for field notes, and started writing as Tommy spoke. Protocol 1. Never patrol alone after midnight. I don't care how routine the call sounds. I don't care if it's just a welfare check or a noise complaint. After midnight, you take backup or you don't go. If there's no backup available, you wait until sunrise. What if it's an emergency? Define emergency. Someone actively dying? Call for medical and the FBI. Active shooting? Same thing. Everything else can wait 6 hours. Trust me on this. I wrote it down, still skeptical but willing to listen. Protocol 2. If dogs won't enter an area, neither do you. Doesn't matter if it's a stray, a pet, or a traditional camp dog. If the animal refuses to go somewhere, you turn around. Dogs know things we don't. That seems like it could interfere with investigations. It will keep you alive, which is more important. Protocol 3. If you see lights in the distance that don't move, don't approach them. They should flicker, sway, show some movement. If they're perfectly still, mark the location and report it. But don't get close. What are they? Different things. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes something you don't want to meet. He continued without giving me time to process. Protocol 4. Missing livestock gets reported to the chapter house elders, not just filed away. Even if it seems like theft or predation, the elders need to know. Why? Because sometimes it's not theft or predation. The way he said it made my skin crawl, but I kept writing. Protocol 5. If someone calls for help in perfect English at 3 a.m. from a phone number you don't recognize, be extremely careful. Ask them specific questions about the area, about local geography. If their answers are too perfect, if they know things they shouldn't, terminate the call and report it. I don't understand. You will. Protocol 6. Never follow tire tracks that end suddenly. If you're tracking a vehicle and the tracks just stop in the middle of nowhere, turn around. Don't look for where they went. Don't try to figure it out. Just leave. I stared at my notes, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. These didn't sound like normal police protocols. They sounded like survival rules for a horror movie. And Protocol 7, Tommy said, his voice dropping lower. This is the most important one, and the one most officers break because it seems the most arbitrary. Never stop for hitchhikers after sunset on Route 163. From the Utah border down to Mexican Hat, that whole stretch. Doesn't matter if they look like they're stranded, doesn't matter if they're elderly or appear to be injured. Do not stop. Do not pick them up. Do not engage. What if someone actually needs help? They can wait until morning. Anyone actually stranded out here at night knows to stay with their vehicle and wait for sunrise. Anyone standing on the road hitchhiking after dark is not what they appear to be. I closed my notebook, my head spinning. Tommy, with all due respect, these sound like urban legends. Are you seriously telling me that... I'm telling you that I've been doing this job for 14 years, and I've seen 3 officers die or disappear because they didn't follow the protocols. I'm telling you that your grandfather, Ben Sozi, was consulted when we developed these rules because he understands things that don't fit in your academy textbooks. And I'm telling you that the reservation at night is not the same place it is during the day. You don't have to believe in the reasons behind the protocols. You just have to follow them. We sat in silence for a moment, the immensity of the landscape pressing in on us despite the open space. Does everyone follow these? I asked. The ones who last do. The ones who don't either leave the force within a year or they learn the hard way. He started the engine. Come on, let me show you the rest of the district. The rest of that first day was surprisingly normal. We responded to a call about someone's horse getting into a neighbor's garden. We checked on an elderly woman who hadn't picked up her commodities from the chapter house. We pulled over a tourist who was doing 65 in a 45 zone through a community. Regular police work, the kind I'd trained for. But as the sun started to set, painting the buttes in shades of orange and purple, I noticed Tommy's demeanor change. He became more alert, more careful, constantly scanning the landscape. Radio check, he said into his mic. Unit 7 to dispatch. Dispatch, we copy Unit 7. 10-8, returning to station. Copy that, Unit 7. Why are we heading back? I asked. Our shift doesn't end for another 3 hours. Because it's getting dark and we're alone. Protocol 1. We'll do our paperwork at the station, and if any calls come in before midnight, we'll respond together. After midnight, we don't go out unless there's a second unit available. But what if... No what ifs. You follow the protocol. We drove back to Kayenta as darkness fell, and I watched the landscape transform. The majestic buttes became dark silhouettes against the stars. The empty stretches of highway became pools of darkness between our headlights and the distant pinpricks of porch lights marking scattered homes. Everything familiar became strange. My first week was more of the same. Learning the district, meeting community members, handling routine calls. Tommy drilled the protocols into me constantly, adding context and details I hadn't gotten that first day. Protocol 1 was about more than just backup. It was about witnesses. Whatever you see out here at night, you want someone else to see it too. Otherwise, they'll say you imagined it, or you'll start doubting your own memory. Protocol 2 extended to other animals. If the ravens are acting strange, if you see coyotes running away from something instead of toward a potential food, If cattle are pressing against the far side of their enclosure from something you can't see, pay attention. Protocol 3 came with a story. 5 years ago, Officer Caitlin Nez saw lights on Black Mesa. Perfectly still, like stars that had fallen to Earth. She hiked up to investigate. Took her 3 days to find her way back down, and when she did, she couldn't stop crying. Wouldn't say what she saw. Quit the force a week later and moved to Albuquerque. Last I heard, she still won't drive anywhere near the reservation. Protocol 4 was about respecting the knowledge of elders. They know patterns we don't see. They'll know if the missing livestock is normal predation or something else. And if it's something else, there are people who know how to handle it better than we do. Protocol 5 made more sense after Tommy explained it. Most people out here speak Navajo first, English second. If someone calls in distress and their English is perfect, too perfect, that's a red flag. And if they're calling at 3 a.m., which is the worst hour, the time when bad things happen, be suspicious. Protocol 6 was the one that bothered me most because Tommy refused to elaborate. Some things move without leaving tracks for all of their journey. If you follow where the tracks end, you'll find where they went, and you don't want to be there when they come back. But it was Protocol 7 that I kept thinking about. Never stop for hitchhikers after sunset on Route 163. It seemed so specific, so arbitrary. When I pressed Tommy about it, he just said, "That's the one most new officers break. That's the one that costs them." On my 6th day, we were driving north on 163 around 4 in the afternoon when Tommy's phone rang. He answered, listened, then hung up and immediately turned the vehicle around. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Call got canceled. Supposed to respond to a breakdown near the Utah border, but the caller just rang back and said a friend picked them up. We're heading back, but we're already halfway there. Daniel." He used my first name, which he rarely did. "It's going to be sunset in 2 hours. We'd be responding to the scene right at dusk, and the drive back would put us on that stretch of road after dark. We're not doing it." "You really think something would happen?" "I think the protocol exists for a reason, and I'm not testing it with a rookie in the car." We drove back to Kayenta, and I watched the sun set in my side mirror, turning the sky blood red. That night, I stayed with my grandfather. My mother had prepared a meal, mutton stew and fry bread, and we ate together while my sister talked about her classes at the community college. After dinner, my grandfather and I sat outside, looking at the stars. "Tommy told me about the protocols," I said. My grandfather nodded slowly. "Good. He's teaching you the right way." "Shinali, are they real? The things the protocols protect against?" He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke in Navajo. "There are things that walk in the world that are not meant to be understood by the modern mind. Your academy taught you to look for evidence, for logic, for explanations. But some things exist outside that framework. They follow older rules, rules that were here before the white man brought his science, rules that will be here long after. The protocols acknowledge those rules without trying to understand them. That's wisdom. But what are they? The things we're protecting against? It's better not to have names for them. Names have power. Names draw attention. The protocols keep you safe not just because they prevent encounters, but because they prevent understanding. Some knowledge is dangerous, Shiazi. Some things, once seen, cannot be unseen. I wanted to argue, wanted to demand clear explanations and rational understanding. But something in my grandfather's voice, something in the weight of the darkness beyond our small circle of porch light, made me stay quiet. "Will I see them?" I asked finally. "That depends on whether you follow the protocols." I went back to my room that night and reviewed my notes, reading through the 7 protocols again and again. They still didn't make complete sense, still felt like superstition dressed up as procedure. But Tommy's warning echoed in my mind. These protocols were written in someone's blood. My 7th day on the job started normally. We responded to a call about a domestic dispute in the morning, spent the afternoon doing welfare checks on elderly residents. The sun was starting to set when we got a call about a possible stranded motorist on Route 163, about 20 miles north of our location. Unit 7 responding, Tommy said into the radio, but I could hear the hesitation in his voice. We drove north, and I watched the light fade from the sky. The sun dropped behind the western mesas, and shadows stretched long across the highway. "We're not going to make it before dark," I said. "I know. We'll do a quick check and head straight back. Stay in the vehicle unless I tell you otherwise." We crested a hill, and there in the distance, illuminated by our headlights, was a figure standing on the shoulder of the road. As we got closer, I could see it was an elderly woman, probably in her 70s, wearing a long skirt and a velvet shirt in traditional style. She was facing away from us, perfectly still, not waving for help or showing any sign that she'd heard our engine. Tommy slowed down but didn't stop. He drove past her slowly, and I watched her in my side mirror. She didn't turn, didn't move, just stood there facing the empty desert. "Tommy, we should help. Protocol 7, he said, his voice tight. "We don't stop. She's an elderly woman stranded on the highway. Look at her feet, Daniel." I looked back. In our taillights, I could see the woman's feet clearly. She was wearing traditional moccasins, but something was wrong. The angle was off, like her feet were on backwards, or like she was standing on something I couldn't see. "What? Don't look at her face. If she turns around, don't look at her face." We drove for another 100 yards, and I couldn't stop watching in the mirror. The woman finally moved, turning slowly to face our retreating vehicle. I started to look up, to see her face in the mirror, but Tommy reached over and physically turned my head forward. "Don't. Look." His hand was shaking. We drove in silence for 5 miles before Tommy finally spoke. "That's why we have Protocol 7. "What was that?" "Something that wanted you to stop, something that was very glad when we didn't." But the caller said someone was stranded. There was no caller, Daniel. That call came through on a disconnected line. The number belonged to a phone that was destroyed in a house fire 3 years ago. Dispatch didn't catch it because it's happened before and they're used to it. My mouth went dry. "It calls for help, it can use phones, it can do a lot of things, and it would have done them to you if we'd stopped." We drove back to Kayenta, and I kept checking my mirror, but the road behind us was empty. Just darkness and the fading line of our taillights disappearing into the night. At the station, Tommy pulled me aside before we went in to do our reports. "You did good today. You listened. A lot of new officers, they don't listen. They think they know better. They think they're smarter than the old stories and the old warnings." He paused. "But you were going to get out of the vehicle, weren't you? Before I stopped you." I nodded, ashamed. "That's normal. That's instinct. We're trained to help people, and we want to believe the world makes sense. But out here, after dark, different rules apply. You follow the protocols, or the protocols follow you. Understand?" "Yes, sir. Good. Now let's go write up a whole lot of nothing in our reports." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that figure in my mind, the elderly woman standing alone on the highway, her feet at that impossible angle. I kept thinking about how close I'd come to stopping, to getting out of the vehicle, to approaching her. What would have happened if Tommy hadn't been there? At 3 in the morning, I heard my phone ring. Unknown number. I stared at it for a long moment, remembering Protocol 5. If someone calls for help in perfect English at 3 in the morning, be extremely careful. I didn't answer. The phone rang 3 more times throughout the night, always from different numbers, always disconnecting before going to voicemail. In the morning, I called Tommy. "Did you get calls last night?" I asked. "Yeah, started around 3, stopped at sunrise." "What did they want?" "Nothing good. It was testing you, seeing if you'd answer, seeing if you'd respond. You didn't, so that's good. It'll move on to easier prey." "It?" "What it?" "The less you know, the better you'll sleep." But I wasn't sleeping. That was the problem. Because now I understood what my grandfather had meant about knowledge being dangerous. I'd seen something that didn't fit into my framework of reality, something that the academy hadn't prepared me for, something that made all my education and training feel inadequate. And this was only my first week. I had years ahead of me on this job, patrolling these roads, responding to calls in the darkness, navigating the space between what I'd been taught and what actually existed. The protocols weren't superstition. They were a map. A guide for navigating a world that was bigger and stranger and more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. I pulled out my notebook and read through them again, but this time they didn't feel arbitrary. They felt like anchors, like rules that might keep me tethered to reality in a place where reality itself seemed negotiable. Protocol 7. Never stop for hitchhikers after sunset on Route 163. I understood now. I understood completely. And I knew with cold certainty that someday I would break that protocol. Because that's what the thing on the road was waiting for. That's what it had been waiting for all along. It was patient, it had time, and eventually all officers break protocol at least once. I just hoped I'd survive it when I did. 2 weeks after my first encounter with the woman on Route 163, I thought I was getting used to the job. I'd learned the rhythm of reservation policing, the balance between official procedure and community relationships. I'd started to recognize the regular faces, the families that needed extra attention, the spots where teenagers liked to party on weekends. I was becoming part of the fabric of the place, but I still hadn't stopped thinking about that night. The woman standing alone on the highway, her feet at that impossible angle, the way Tommy's hand had shaken when he forced me to look away. The phone calls at 3 in the morning that had continued for 3 nights before finally stopping. Tommy and I hadn't talked about it much since then. He seemed satisfied that I'd followed protocol, and he'd moved on to teaching me other aspects of the job. But sometimes I'd catch him watching me, like he was waiting for something, anticipating a moment that hadn't arrived yet. That moment came on September 4th, a Thursday. Tommy had called in sick that morning, the first time he'd missed work since I'd started. Food poisoning, his wife said when I called to check on him. He'd be back in a couple days. The sergeant asked if I felt comfortable patrolling alone, and I said yes. I'd been on the job for over 2 weeks. I knew the protocols. I'd be fine. Besides, it was daytime. The protocols were mostly about night operations, about what happened after dark. During the day, the reservation was just a place, beautiful and vast and normal. I started my patrol around 9 in the morning, heading north on 163 toward Mexican Hat. The sky was that perfect deep blue you only get in the high desert, and the morning light made the rock formations glow like they were lit from within. A few tourists were already out, photographing the mittens and the other famous formations. I did a welfare check on an elderly couple near Goulding's, helped a tourist change a flat tire near the Utah border, and stopped for lunch at a roadside stand where a woman sold fry bread and cold drinks. Normal day. Easy patrol. Around 2 in the afternoon, I was heading back south on 163 when I saw her. The same elderly woman, or someone who looked exactly like her. She was standing on the shoulder about 50 yards ahead, facing the road this time, one hand raised like she was flagging down help. She was wearing the same traditional velvet shirt, the same long skirt, but it was 2 in the afternoon, full daylight. Protocol 7 specifically said never stop after sunset. I slowed down, my training and my instincts at war with each other. Every rule I'd learned at the academy said you help people who need help. Every protocol Tommy had taught me said you don't stop for hitchhikers on this road. But it was daytime. Surely the protocol didn't apply during daylight hours. That's why Tommy had specified after sunset, right? The woman waved more frantically as I approached. I could see her face clearly now, deeply lined, weathered by decades of sun and wind. She looked genuinely distressed. I pulled over. Tommy's voice echoed in my head as I put the vehicle in park. That's the one most new officers break. That's the one that costs them. But I was already opening my door, already stepping out onto the highway shoulder. The woman started walking toward me, moving slowly, and I could see she was limping. "Are you all right, ma'am?" I called out in Navajo. "Do you need help?" She responded in English, her voice rough and dry. "My car broke down, back there about a mile. I've been walking for hours. Can you give me a ride to Kayenta?" Something about her perfect English triggered a memory. Protocol 5. If someone calls for help in perfect English at 3 in the morning, be extremely careful. But this wasn't 3 in the morning. This was 2 in the afternoon. "Where's your car?" I asked. "I can call for a tow truck." "It's too far gone. The engine died completely. I just need a ride." She was closer now, about 10 feet away. In the bright sunlight, I could see every detail of her face, every wrinkle, every age spot. She looked completely real, completely human. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Caitlin Begay." "And you're from Kayenta?" "Yes, near the chapter house. Please, officer, I've been walking in this heat for hours. I'm not as young as I used to be." Every instinct said she was telling the truth. She looked exhausted, dehydrated, exactly like someone who'd been stranded on a desert highway for hours. And I was a police officer. This was literally my job. "All right," I said, "I can give you a ride. Do you have any ID with you?" "It's in my car, with my purse." I didn't think to grab it when I started walking. I opened the back door of my patrol vehicle and gestured for her to get in. She moved slowly, her limp pronounced, and I had to help her into the seat. Her hand felt normal when I touched it, warm and slightly rough with calluses. Real. I got back in the driver's seat and glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She was sitting properly, hands folded in her lap, looking straight ahead. Normal. "You'll want to buckle up," I said, starting the engine. She fumbled with the seatbelt for a moment, then clicked it into place. I pulled back onto the highway and headed south toward Kayenta. For the first few miles, everything seemed fine. She sat quietly in the back, not talking, just watching the landscape pass. I tried to make conversation. "How long were you walking?" "A few hours. I lost track of time." "Why didn't you stay with your car?" "It's safer to wait there." "I didn't think anyone would come." "The highway's been empty all day." That wasn't true. I'd passed at least a dozen vehicles going in both directions during my patrol. But maybe she'd been walking during a quiet period. "What kind of car do you drive?" "A truck. Old Ford." "What color?" She hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Blue." Something was wrong. I couldn't pinpoint what, but my instincts were screaming at me now. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror again, and she was still sitting in the same position, hands folded, staring straight ahead. Wait, she was staring straight ahead, but her eyes weren't moving, weren't tracking the landscape, weren't blinking, weren't showing any of the tiny unconscious movements that living eyes make. They were fixed, like a doll's eyes. I looked back at the road, my heart starting to pound. "Mrs. Begay, are you feeling okay?" I'm fine. Her voice was wrong, too. Not rough and dry anymore, smoother, flatter, like someone doing an impression of how a person should sound rather than actually sounding like a person. I checked the mirror again, and this time I saw it. Her reflection in the mirror was slightly out of sync with her actual position. When she moved her hand to adjust her skirt, the reflection moved a half-second later. Protocol 7. Never stop for hitchhikers after sunset on Route 163. But I'd stopped during the day. I thought I was being smart, finding a loophole in the protocol. But the protocol hadn't specified sunset because that's when it appeared. It specified sunset because that's when you could see what it really was. I reached for my radio. Unit 7 to dispatch. Static. Unit 7 to dispatch, do you copy? More static, and underneath it, something else. That tone, the same frequency I'd heard that first week, the sound that seemed to exist between realities. Dispatch isn't going to answer, the thing in my back seat said, and its voice was different now. Not old and weathered, younger, wrong. I looked in the mirror. She was still sitting in the same position, but now I could see that her neck was bent at an angle that would be impossible for a living person. Her head was tilted too far back, and when I looked at her reflection, it showed her head tilted in the opposite direction. "What are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You stopped." "You picked me up, that's all that matters." "I'm pulling over. Get out of my vehicle." "No, I don't think so." "Keep driving, Daniel. Drive south. There's someone who wants to meet you." It knew my name. I considered reaching for my gun, but what would I shoot? How do you shoot something whose reflection doesn't match its position? How do you threaten something that shouldn't exist? "Look at me, Daniel. Look at me directly. Not in the mirror. I want you to see. No. Look at me." Its voice had changed again, layered now. Multiple voices speaking in unison. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, refusing to turn around. "Tommy told you not to look that first night. He was right, but you're going to look eventually. Everyone looks. That's how it works." The temperature in the vehicle dropped suddenly, and I could see my breath fogging in the air despite the afternoon heat outside. The radio crackled with static, and through it, I heard voices, dozens of them, all talking at once, all saying my name. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want you to break the other protocols. You've already broken Protocol 7. Let's see how many others you can break before sunrise. That's the game." "This isn't a game, isn't it? You think Tommy follows the protocols perfectly? You think any of the officers do? Everyone breaks at least one, usually the same one. Usually Protocol 7. You're not special, Daniel. You're just the latest player." I could see Kayenta in the distance now, the cluster of buildings and lights that marked civilization. If I could just get there, get to the station, get around other people. "Protocol 1, the thing said. Never patrol alone after midnight." But it's not midnight yet, is it? We have hours. We have all night. It's 2 in the afternoon. Is it? I looked at the dashboard clock. 11:47 p.m. That was impossible. I'd stopped for the woman at 2 in the afternoon. How could it be almost midnight? "Time works differently when you break the protocols," the thing said. "You opened a door." I walked through, and now we're somewhere else. Somewhen else. I looked out the window. The landscape was the same, Monument Valley in all its majestic scope. But the light was wrong. It was dark now, stars overhead, the rock formations reduced to black silhouettes against the sky. This isn't real. This is what happens when you ignore the rules that kept you safe. This is the space between following protocol and breaking it, and you're going to stay here until you learn. I pressed the accelerator, speeding toward Kayenta. But no matter how fast I drove, the lights never got closer. The distance remained constant, like I was on a treadmill, running in place. Protocol 2, the thing continued. If dogs won't enter an area, neither do you. But there are no dogs here, Daniel. It's just you and me. Tommy will realize I'm missing. He'll come looking for me. Tommy is sick. Food poisoning, remember? Except it's not food poisoning. It's because he came too close to figuring out the pattern. He got too smart, started connecting dots he shouldn't have connected. So he's home in bed, unable to help you, unable to even think clearly about why you might need help. The thing leaned forward, and I could feel its breath on the back of my neck. Cold, smelling like old earth and copper. Don't turn around, I said to myself. Don't look at it. But you want to. You're curious, you want to understand. That's what doomed all the others before you. The need to know. The need to make sense of something that deliberately defies sense. My phone rang, the sound impossibly loud in the confined space. I grabbed it without thinking, desperate for any connection to the real world. Hello? Daniel? It was my mother's voice. Daniel, where are you? Your grandfather is sick. He's asking for you. He says it's urgent. Mom, I glanced at the clock. 11:52 p.m. I'm on patrol. I can't. He says you broke a protocol. He says you need to remember what he taught you. He says... The line went dead. Protocol 5, the thing said. Calls at 3 in the morning. But that wasn't 3 in the morning, was it? That was 11:52. Does the protocol apply? Are you sure? I was losing track of the rules. They were blurring together, the boundaries between them becoming indistinct. That was the point, I realized. Confusion. Uncertainty. Make me doubt the protocols so I'd break more of them. What happens if I break all 7? I asked. Then you become like me. Existing in the space between the rules. Not quite real, not quite unreal. Visible only to those who break the protocols. Feeding on the confusion, the fear, the delicious moment when someone realizes the world is bigger and stranger than they believed. I won't break the others. You already have. You're patrolling alone after midnight. Protocol 1, broken. I didn't mean to. Intent doesn't matter. Only actions matter. You broke it. The road ahead split suddenly. 2 versions of Highway 163 diverging in impossible directions. In one direction, I could see Kayenta, the lights warm and welcoming. In the other, darkness, and something moving in that darkness. Choose, the thing said. Town or truth. Safety or understanding. Run back to the protocols, or break them all, and learn what really lives in the spaces between. I aimed for Kayenta, but my hands turned the wheel towards the darkness. Not my choice. Something else moving my hands, guiding the vehicle toward the unknown. Good, the thing whispered. Protocol 6. Never follow tire tracks that end suddenly. But these aren't tire tracks, are they? These are choices, and yours just ended. Let's see where we are when they begin again. The headlights illuminated the road ahead, and I saw them. Dozens of them. People standing along the shoulder, all facing the highway, all perfectly still. Men, women, children, all wearing traditional clothes from different eras, all with the same empty eyes. These are the ones who broke all 7 protocols, the thing said. They're waiting, hoping someone will stop for them, hoping to pass along what happened to them. That's the final rule, Daniel. The 8th protocol that nobody tells you about. Once you've broken all 7, you become the protocol. You become the warning. I slammed on the brakes, and the vehicle skidded to a stop. I was breathing hard, sweat pouring down my face despite the cold. I had to think, had to remember my training, my grandfather's teachings, something that could anchor me. Names have power, my grandfather had said. Some things, once named, become real. I closed my eyes and spoke in Navajo, the language of my people, the words my grandfather had taught me for protection. The thing in the back seat screamed, not a human scream, something deeper, resonant, the sound of something ancient being forced back into the shadows where it belonged. I kept speaking, kept reciting the prayers my grandfather had made me memorize, even though I'd thought they were superstition. The temperature began to rise. The darkness outside started to recede. "You can't," the thing started, but its voice was weakening. I opened my eyes and looked in the mirror, not at the thing itself, but at my own reflection, at my own face, at the badge on my uniform, at the symbol of my authority, my connection to the community, my responsibility to protect. "You're not real," I said. "You're a test, a consequence, but you're not real. I'm as real as you let me be. Then I choose not to let you be real." Get out of my vehicle. Silence. I looked in the back seat. Empty. I looked at the clock. 2:47 p.m. I was still on Highway 163, exactly where I'd stopped to pick up the woman. No time had passed, or all of it had happened in a moment between heartbeats. My radio crackled. "Unit 7, do you copy?" I grabbed it with shaking hands. "Unit 7 copies. Everything all right out there? You've been stationary for 20 minutes. 20 minutes, not hours, 20 minutes. I'm fine, dispatch. Thought I saw someone who needed help, but it was a false alarm." "Copy that. Be advised," Officer Benally called in. "He's feeling better and wants to know if you need him to come in." "Negative. Tell him to rest. I'll be fine." "Copy that, Unit 7. I sat there for a long moment trying to process what had just happened. Had it been real? Had I actually picked something up, or had I simply imagined the entire encounter as a warning from my subconscious? My phone buzzed. A text from Tommy. "You stopped for her, didn't you?" I stared at the message. How could he know? Another text. "It's okay. Everyone does. The important thing is you found your way back. See you tomorrow. We need to talk about Protocol 8. Protocol 8? There were only 7 protocols. Tommy had been clear about that. Unless there was an 8th one. The one they only told you about after you'd broken one of the others. The one about what happened to officers who'd seen too much. I started the engine and drove south toward Kayenta. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of something standing where I'd been parked. The elderly woman watching me drive away. This time, I didn't stop looking at her. I watched until she disappeared from view, and I saw what Tommy had kept me from seeing that first night. She was standing, but she had no legs below the knee, just darkness where her lower body should be, like she was emerging from the ground itself. And she was smiling. I understood now. Protocol 7 wasn't about stopping for hitchhikers. It was about what stopped for you. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the woman standing on the highway, her body ending at the knees, emerging from darkness like a plant growing from poisoned soil. I kept checking the clock, making sure time was moving normally, making sure I was still in the real world and not trapped in that in-between space where protocols dissolved and impossible things became real. At dawn, I drove to my grandfather's house. He was sitting outside his hogan, wrapped in a blanket despite the warmth, watching the sun rise over the mesas. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "You broke one," he said in Navajo. It wasn't a question. "Protocol 7. I stopped for someone during daylight. I thought, you thought the protocol was about time, about darkness. But it was never about when. Shiazi. It was about the road itself, about that specific stretch of highway where the membrane is thin. I sat down next to him, my exhaustion making me feel hollow. She took me somewhere time didn't work right. She said I'd broken Protocol 1, too, that I was patrolling alone after midnight even though I'd only stopped for 20 minutes. Time is different in the spaces between. You were only gone 20 minutes in this world. But in that space, you lived hours, maybe more. The experience ages you in ways that don't show on your body. Tommy said something about Protocol 8. He said we needed to talk about it. My grandfather nodded slowly. The 8th protocol is the one they don't teach until you've broken one of the others. Because once you've broken a protocol, you've been touched by what lives in those spaces. You've been marked, and the 8th protocol is about living with that mark. What is it? Protocol 8 is simple, but the hardest to follow. Never speak about what you've seen to anyone who hasn't seen it themselves. The knowledge is dangerous. It spreads like a disease. The more people who know, the more the membrane weakens, the more the things that live in the spaces between can push through. But Tommy and I talk about, Tommy has seen. He broke Protocol 4 in his 2nd year, followed missing livestock into a place he shouldn't have gone. The other officers at your station, the ones who've lasted more than a few years, they've all broken at least one protocol. They've all seen. That's why they can speak to each other about it. But your family, your friends, anyone who hasn't been touched, you can't tell them. Not the details, not what it really was. What happens if I do? Then you break Protocol 8 and they become vulnerable. They become visible to the things that hunt in the between. You'd be painting targets on the people you love. I thought about my mother, my sister, safe in their ignorance of what really moved through the world. The idea of making them vulnerable, of exposing them to what I'd seen, made me feel sick. How do I live with this? I asked. How do I do this job, knowing what's out there? The same way I've lived with being a Hatawi, the same way Tommy lives with being an officer. You acknowledge the truth, but you don't let it consume you. You follow the protocols, you protect others, and you accept that some knowledge can't be shared, only carried. We sat in silence, watching the morning light transform the landscape from shadow to substance. Normal. Real, beautiful. Hard to believe that just hours ago I'd been trapped in a place where none of those concepts applied. The woman said others had broken the protocols before me, I said. She said they became like her, waiting by the road for the next person to stop. Yes, not all who break the protocols find their way back. Some get lost in the between. Some become part of what haunts that space. It's a kind of hunger, feeding on confusion and fear. Those who can't find their center, who don't have strong enough ties to this world, they drift. Could that happen to me? My grandfather looked at me with those dark eyes that had seen 7 decades of life on the reservation. It could happen to anyone. That's why the protocols exist. Not just to protect you from what's out there, but to protect you from becoming what's out there. I drove back to Kayenta feeling like I'd aged years overnight. Tommy was waiting for me at the station, looking better but still a little pale. He gestured for me to follow him outside, away from the other officers. "You handled it well," he said, once we were alone. "I monitored the radio, heard you stop, heard the long silence, heard you come back. 20 minutes, that's better than most. Officer Jackson was gone for 3 hours his first time. Tommy, it said it could make me patrol alone after midnight. It said I'd already broken Protocol 1. It lies. That's what it does. It tries to make you doubt the protocols, make you think you've already broken them so you might as well break more. But you didn't patrol alone after midnight. You stopped during the day, and what happened in that 20 minutes happened outside of normal time. The protocols still held. But I broke Protocol 7, yes, and you survived. That's the important part. Now you know why the protocol exists. Now you'll never break it again. She mentioned others. Officers who broke all 7 protocols. Tommy's expression darkened. There have been 5 in the 42 years of tribal policing here. 5 officers who broke all 7 and never came back. Their vehicles were found on Route 163 empty, engines running. No trace of the officers themselves. The official report said they abandoned their posts, went AWOL, but we know what really happened. They're still out there, waiting by the road. Yes, which is why we teach the protocols so carefully, why we pass them down, why we watch new officers like hawks for the first few months. Why didn't you tell me this could happen? Why didn't you warn me more seriously? Would you have believed me? Before you experienced it yourself? You're educated, modern, trained in scientific thinking. If I'd told you that stopping for hitchhikers could trap you in a pocket dimension where time doesn't work and things without legs stand on highways, would you have taken that seriously? He was right. I wouldn't have. I'd have thought it was hazing, or superstition, or some kind of test. Protocol 8, I said. My grandfather told me about it. Good. That's appropriate. He's qualified to teach it. The rule about not spreading the knowledge to those who haven't been touched. It's the hardest one for new officers because you want to tell your family, warn your friends. But you can't. The knowledge itself is dangerous. So we just carry this alone. No, we carry it together. Those of us who've seen, we share the burden. We watch out for each other. We make sure nobody drifts too far into the between. He paused. There's a gathering tonight. A few officers from different districts. We meet once a month. Those of us who've broken protocols and survived. Share experiences, keep each other grounded. I think you should come. That night, I drove to a house on the outskirts of Kayenta. It belonged to a retired officer named Henry Nestsosi, and when I arrived, there were 4 vehicles already parked outside. Tommy met me at the door. Inside, 7 officers sat in a circle. I recognized a couple of them from regional meetings, but most were strangers. They ranged in age from late 20s to 60s, representing different districts across the Navajo Nation. Everyone, Tommy said, this is Daniel Sosi. He broke Protocol 7 last week. Encountered the hitchhiker. The others nodded, and I saw recognition in their eyes. Not judgment, just understanding. Have a seat, Daniel, Henry said. He was in his 60s, gray-haired, with a weathered face that spoke of decades in the desert sun. We all go around and share what we've seen in the past month, what protocols we've had to invoke, what's been active in our districts. It helps us see patterns, keep track of escalations. For the next hour, I listened to stories that would have seemed insane a week ago. Officer Caitlin Benelli from Chinle had encountered lights that didn't move, perfectly still in the distance. She'd marked the location and reported it to elders, following Protocols 2 and 3 simultaneously. Officer James Begay from Shiprock had found tire tracks that ended suddenly, leading nowhere. He'd turned around immediately, following Protocol 6, but not before seeing something move in the rocks where the tracks ended. Each story was told simply, without embellishment, just facts reported like any other police work. But the facts themselves were impossible, violations of physics and logic and normal reality. When it came to my turn, I described my encounter with the hitchhiker, the way she'd looked normal in daylight, the impossible 20 minutes that felt like hours, the reflection that didn't match movement, the moment when I'd realized her body ended at the knees. "You saw her true form," Henry said when I finished. "That's rare on a first encounter. Most officers see what she wants them to see right up until the moment they escape. You must have strong spiritual protection." "Your grandfather's teachings?" "He made me learn prayers. I thought it was just tradition. It's more than tradition. It's armor, the old ways, the ceremonies, the language itself. They're weapons against what lives in the between. That's why the things out there fear the Hatawi, the medicine people who know the deepest prayers." She said I'd become like her if I broke all 7 protocols. That's true. Each protocol you break weakens your connection to this reality. Break them all, and you drift entirely into the between. You become stuck there, neither fully in our world nor fully in theirs. The ones who've done that, they're not dead, but they're not alive either. They exist in that liminal space, visible only to those who break protocols, feeding on the fear and confusion of new victims. An officer named Rita Talsalt spoke up. She was maybe 30, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "I broke 3 protocols in my first year. 3, 4, and 7. Each time I thought I was being smart, finding exceptions, working around the spirit of the rule while technically following the letter. But the protocols don't work that way. They're absolute. Either you follow them completely or you break them completely. There's no middle ground." "How did you survive breaking 3?" I asked. "Barely. The 3rd time I was gone for 6 hours. When I came back, I'd aged. Not physically, but mentally. I felt years older. My family said I was different, harder. It took me months to feel like myself again." She looked at me directly. "You broke one and got out fast. Good. Don't break another. Because each time it's harder to find your way back. Each time, the between keeps a little piece of you." The meeting continued for another hour, and I learned about the broader network. There were officers all across the Navajo Nation who'd broken protocols and survived. They looked out for each other, shared information about active areas, warned each other about escalations. It was like a secret organization within the police force, bound not by official structure but by shared trauma and impossible knowledge. As the meeting broke up, Henry pulled me aside. "Your grandfather is Ben Sosi, correct?" "Yes, I knew him when I was young. He helped develop the protocols back in the 70s, after we lost 3 officers in 2 years. He worked with the department to translate the old warnings, the traditional knowledge, into language police officers could use. The protocols are his work as much as anyone's." That night, I drove back to my grandfather's house. He was still awake, tending a small fire outside his hogan. "You went to the gathering," he said. "Tommy took me. There were 7 officers there. All of them had broken protocols. All of them had survived. Good. You need that community. The work you do, it isolates you from those who haven't seen, but it connects you to those who have. They said you helped create the protocols." He nodded. "In the 70s, the tribal police was losing officers. They would quit or disappear or go mad. The department asked me and other Hatawi to consult. We told them what we knew, what had been passed down through generations. The places where the membrane was thin, the times when crossing was most dangerous, the signs that indicated a presence. They translated that knowledge into protocols. Why 7 protocols? Why not more? 7 is a sacred number. 7 directions: east, south, west, north, above, below, and within. 7 ceremonies in the traditional way. The protocols mirror that structure. They're not random rules. They're spiritual technology, translating ancient wisdom into modern practice." I stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. I'm going to see more, aren't I? This isn't over. No, it's not over. You've been marked now. The things that live in the between know you can see them. They'll test you again, but you'll be ready. You have the protocols. You have your prayers. You have your community. And you have the knowledge that you're not crazy, that what you've seen is real. Is it always going to be like this? Every patrol wondering if I'll encounter something impossible. Not every patrol. The between is patient. It might be weeks, months, even years before you have another encounter. But it will happen, and when it does, you'll know what to do. I drove home that night and actually slept, exhausted by the emotional weight of the past few days. But my dreams were strange, full of highways that went nowhere, and women who stood on darkness, and voices that spoke in layered tones, asking me to break just one more protocol, just one more rule, to see what would happen. When I woke up, it was with the certainty that my grandfather was right. I'd been marked, changed. I was part of something now that I couldn't leave, even if I wanted to. I was a Navajo Tribal Police officer who'd broken Protocol 7 and survived. And Protocol 8 meant I could never tell anyone outside the circle what that truly meant. The knowledge was mine to carry, a weight that would never lighten, only become familiar. But at least I wasn't carrying it alone. 3 months passed after I broke Protocol 7. 3 months of normal patrols, routine calls, the everyday work of reservation policing. I responded to domestic disputes and welfare checks. I helped tourists with flat tires and gave directions to people lost in the maze of dirt roads that Spider Thompsoned across the land. I did my job, followed the protocols religiously, and tried to convince myself that my encounter with the hitchhiker had been an isolated incident. But I was different now, and everyone could see it. My mother noticed I was quieter, more watchful. My sister asked if something had happened at work, if I'd seen something traumatic. I gave vague answers, remembering Protocol 8. The knowledge stays with those who've been touched. Tommy noticed too, but in a different way. He watched me with approval, like I'd passed some test he'd been waiting for me to take. The other officers who'd been at the gathering would nod to me in passing, a silent acknowledgement of shared understanding. I'd become part of the club nobody wants to join. December came, and with it, the cold that transforms the high desert. The tourists thinned out, leaving the roads emptier, the landscapes more desolate. Patrol shifts became longer and lonelier. Hours of driving through vast nothingness with only the radio and your own thoughts for company. I was working a night shift when it happened. Tommy was with me, which meant I wasn't technically breaking Protocol 1. We'd been called to check on an elderly man near Mexican Hat who hadn't shown up for a community meeting. A routine welfare check, the kind we did several times a week. We drove north on Route 163, and as we passed mile marker 127, Tommy's phone rang. He answered, listened, then hung up with a troubled expression. That was dispatch. Another call came in. Missing livestock near Ojado. They want us to respond there first since we're closer. Protocol 4. Missing livestock gets reported to the chapter house elders, not just filed away. We should let the elders know, I said. Already done. Dispatch contacted them. But we still need to do the official report, check the scene. We turned off the highway onto a dirt road that wound through increasingly rough terrain. The hour was approaching midnight, and the landscape looked alien in our headlights, all sharp shadows and strange angles. How many livestock? I asked. 12 sheep, disappeared from a pen overnight. No signs of forced entry, no blood, no tracks, just gone. That fit the pattern for something other than normal predation. Coyotes or mountain lions would have left evidence. Thieves would have left tire tracks. We arrived at a small homestead, A traditional hogan with a few outbuildings and corrals. An older man named Mr. Yazzie met us, clearly distressed. "They were here at sunset when I locked them up," he said in Navajo. "This morning, gone." The gate was still latched. Nothing was disturbed. It's like they vanished into air. Tommy and I examined the pen by flashlight. Mr. Yazzie was right. No tracks leading out, no damage to the fence, no wool caught on barbs or posts. 12 sheep had simply ceased to exist in that space. "We'll file the report," Tommy told him. "The elders will be contacted." "Have you noticed anything else unusual? Strange sounds at night? Lights where there shouldn't be any?" Mr. Yazzie hesitated, then nodded. "2 nights ago, I heard singing. Not Navajo songs. Something else. Old. Wrong. It came from those rocks." He pointed to a formation about 100 yards from his property, a cluster of boulders that formed a natural shelter. Tommy and I exchanged a glance. Protocol 3. Lights in the distance that don't move. But this was about sounds, not lights. "Did you investigate?" Tommy asked. "No, I stayed inside. My grandfather told me stories about those rocks when I was young. Bad things happened there a long time ago. We don't go near them, especially at night." After we finished the report and assured Mr. Yazzie we'd follow up, Tommy and I returned to our vehicle. But instead of leaving, Tommy turned off the engine and sat there, staring at the rock formation. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. About Protocol 4, what about it? It's not just about reporting missing livestock. It's about what causes certain kinds of disappearances. There are places on the reservation where the membrane is especially thin. Places where bad things happened historically. Massacre sites. Places where ceremonies went wrong. Those rocks, they're one of those places. What happened there? In the 1930s, during the livestock reduction program, the government forced families to slaughter their sheep. Right there, at those rocks. Hundreds of animals killed in one day. The people were devastated. Their livelihood, their connection to the land, destroyed by government policy. That kind of trauma, that kind of violence, it leaves a mark, it thins the membrane. So you think whatever took the sheep is connected to that? I think the sheep went into the between. I think they crossed over, into that other space. And I think if we go into those rocks, we'll find where they went." Protocol 2. If dogs won't enter an area, neither do we. Did you see Mr. Yazzie's dogs? They were tied up near the house, as far from those rocks as possible. Then we shouldn't go either. Tommy was quiet for a moment, then said something that changed everything. "I'm going to retire soon. Maybe 6 months. And when I do, you'll be the one training new officers. You'll be the one teaching the protocols. But to really teach them, to really make new officers understand, you need to know more than just the rules. You need to know what happens when you follow them and what happens when you break them. I've already broken one, Protocol 7, yes, but there are others. And I think you need to see what happens when you break Protocol 2, when you enter a place that warns you away. Because someday, a new officer is going to ask you why, and you need to be able to answer with experience, not just rules. You want me to go into those rocks with you. I want you to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. The protocols protect us, but they also limit us. Sometimes, in order to truly protect the community, we need to know what we're protecting them from. We need to see the enemy." I thought about the gathering, about the officers who'd broken multiple protocols. Rita Talsalt had broken 3 and survived. Others had broken 2 or 4. They were still functioning, still doing their jobs, still human. But they'd all said the same thing. Each time you break a protocol, it's harder to find your way back. If we do this, I said, We do it together. And we don't go deeper than we have to. We see what we need to see and we leave. Tommy nodded, agreed. We grabbed our flashlights and weapons, and we walked towards the rocks. With each step, the temperature seemed to drop, and the air felt thicker, harder to breathe. The dogs at Mr. Yazzy's house started barking frantically, sensing what we were approaching. Protocol 2. If dogs won't enter an area, neither do you. We were breaking it, deliberately, and I could feel the membrane responding, thinning, allowing us to pass into a space that existed alongside normal reality, but followed different rules. As we reached the rocks, I saw them, the sheep, all 12 of them, standing in a circle, facing inward, perfectly still. Not eating, not moving, just standing. "They're alive," I whispered. "Are they?" I looked closer. The sheep weren't breathing. Their eyes were open but unseeing, fixed on some central point in the circle. And in that center I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure, man-shaped but wrong. Like someone had described a human to something that had never seen one, and it had done its best to approximate the form. It was sitting cross-legged and it was eating something. Not meat, light. It was consuming the moonlight itself, swallowing the silver glow and leaving darkness in its wake. "What is that?" I asked. "I don't know." Nobody does. We have names for some things, skinwalkers, Yi-Nal-Lushi, but that's not one of them. That's something older, something that was here before we had language to describe it. The figure turned its head toward us, not quickly, but with a slow, deliberate movement. Where its face should have been, there was just smooth darkness, like looking into a void. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to stand still, to observe, to understand. This was what Tommy wanted me to see. This was what the protocols protected against. The figure stood, and the sheep collapsed as one, hitting the ground like puppets with cut strings. Dead or never alive, I couldn't tell. The figure took a step toward us. Tommy grabbed my arm. "Time to go." We backed away, slowly, maintaining eye contact with the void where a face should be. The figure followed, matching our pace, staying exactly 12 feet away. The distance felt significant, intentional. As we reached our vehicle, the figure stopped at the edge of the rocks. It stood there, watching us with its absence of a face, and I understood. It couldn't leave that space. Whatever bound it to those rocks was stronger than its desire to follow. We got in the vehicle, and Tommy drove away faster than was safe on the rough dirt road. Neither of us spoke until we were back on the highway, headed south, putting distance between us and what we'd seen. "That's what Protocol 2 protects us from," Tommy finally said. "Things that are bound to specific places. Things that can't leave but can trap anyone who enters. The sheep entered that space and became part of it. If we'd gone closer, if we'd stayed longer, we might have too. What do we report? Missing livestock, unknown cause. The elders will handle the spiritual aspects. We've done our part." "Tommy, what was it?" "Really? I told you." Nobody knows. Not everything has a name. Not everything has an explanation. Some things just are, and the best we can do is avoid them and warn others to do the same. We drove in silence for a while, and I felt it. The same sensation I'd experienced after breaking Protocol 7. That sense of having aged, of carrying something heavier than I had before. I'd broken 2 protocols now, 7 and 2, each one leaving its mark, changing me in ways I couldn't fully articulate. "How many have you broken?" I asked Tommy. 4? 7? 2, 3, and 6. Each time I learned something. Each time I paid a price. But I'm still here, still doing the job, still teaching new officers. You survive by respecting what you've seen, by following the protocols even more carefully afterward, by never taking for granted that you're immune to the between just because you've escaped it before. When we got back to the station, Tommy pulled out a small leather pouch from his pocket and handed it to me. My wife made this. It's corn pollen, blessed by a hatawi. Keep it with you. When you feel like you're drifting, when the line between realities gets blurry, hold on to it. It'll anchor you. I took the pouch, feeling the weight of it, the significance. This wasn't just a good luck charm. It was a tool, a lifeline, a reminder that I belonged to this world and not the other one. Over the next few months, I settled into a rhythm. I followed the protocols religiously, but I also understood them now on a deeper level. They weren't arbitrary rules. They were a map of the dangerous places, the thin areas, the spots where reality wore through. I attended the monthly gatherings, listened to other officers' stories, shared my own experiences. We were a community bound by impossible knowledge, supporting each other through the weight of what we carried. Tommy retired in June, just as he'd planned. His last day, we drove Route 163 together, one final time. "You'll be good at this," he said. "Training new officers. Teaching the protocols. You understand not just the rules, but the reasons. That's rare. Did you ever regret it? Breaking the protocols you broke?" "No, because I survived them, and the knowledge made me better at protecting others. The protocols keep most officers safe. But sometimes, to truly protect the community, we need to know what we're protecting them from. We need to be willing to look into the darkness so others don't have to. Protocol 8 says we can't tell outsiders. But doesn't that mean the darkness keeps winning? Doesn't that mean it stays hidden? The darkness stays hidden because that's the only way we survive it. If everyone knew, if everyone could see, the membrane would collapse completely. The between would merge with our world, and there would be no safe spaces left. We carry this knowledge so others don't have to. That's the burden. That's the job. My first day training a new officer came 3 weeks later. His name was Daniel Nez, fresh out of the academy, eager and confident in his modern training. I saw myself in him, that same belief that logic and procedure could handle anything. We sat in my patrol vehicle, and I pulled out the notebook where I'd written the protocols Tommy had taught me. "Before we start patrol," I said, "there are 7 protocols you need to learn. They're not in the official manual. They're passed down officer to officer, and they're not optional." He looked skeptical, but he pulled out his own notebook. "Protocol 1, I began. Never patrol alone after midnight." As I taught him the rules, I saw his expression shift from skepticism to confusion to reluctant acceptance. Just as mine had. Just as every new officer's did when confronted with knowledge that defied their understanding of reality. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that eventually he would break one of the protocols. They all did. It was part of the job, part of the learning. You couldn't truly understand the rules until you understood the cost of breaking them. I just hoped, when his time came, he'd survive it. Because I'd broken 2 protocols, and I was still here, still doing the job, still following the rules, still teaching new officers the map of the dangerous places, the thin areas where reality wore through. I was marked, changed, part of something I couldn't leave even if I wanted to. But I wasn't lost. The protocols had kept me tethered. The community of officers who'd seen what I'd seen kept me grounded. My grandfather's teachings kept me protected, and maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all you could ask for when your job required you to patrol the spaces between what people believed and what actually existed. As we drove north on Route 163, I watched Daniel taking notes, memorizing the protocols, not quite believing but willing to listen. And I remembered Tommy's words. You survive by respecting what you've seen. I would teach Daniel the protocols. I would watch him break one, because they all did. And if he survived it, I would welcome him into the gathering, into the community of officers who carried impossible knowledge. Because that's how the cycle continued. That's how we protected not just the community, but each other. One protocol at a time. One officer at a time. One night at a time. Until someone could figure out how to seal the thin places permanently, we would keep patrolling them, keep following the rules, keep teaching new officers the map of where reality ended and the between began. It wasn't heroic, it wasn't even particularly dramatic most days. It was just the job, and I'd learned to make peace with that.